Welcome back to my channel on things helpful when you're in a quarantine. Um, I guess today I'd like to talk about habits, good and bad, or useful and not so useful. Um, I was going to title this talk something like "Regression in Service of the Ego," and one of my friends said that that people will love to hear about that. And that might be true, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. Um, so, regression in the service of the ego or regression in service of the ego is about this idea that it's an old analytic term that relates to um, people having a tendency to fall back on previous ways of coping during stress. Um, so, basically, as we grow up, as we evolve as people, we have different ways at different times in our lives for dealing with stress. As children, we might just completely withdraw or disappear into certain fantasy worlds, and that's not limited to children. People do that. Adults do that as well. Um, so the idea is that this is a particularly stressful situation for some people. And during that stressful time, you might find yourself falling back on old coping skills. Myself, I've noticed I have a tendency to be interested in watching old movies or older TV shows from a time when I was maybe younger and have warm family feelings around. And those are relatively innocuous. That's not a particularly difficult or problematic regression. But it's also possible that people could regress towards other things that are not as useful. That pack of cigarettes might start to look very inviting again. If you drink, you might find yourself drinking more than you used to. What else? Eating too much, things like that. The main point of why I'm bringing this up is that you can't just remove one behavior and then expect another behavior not to kind of creep into its place. So when you think about our normal lives are typically more social. We get out there, we talk to people, we do stuff. And now we're doing less of that, even with using electronic communications and things like that. We're still somewhat more isolated. And it's important to mostly just note when those things start to creep up, the less adaptive behaviors that you might have, when they start to creep up and cause you trouble, like weight gain. One person I was talking to said it's a really great idea to put your jeans on once a week at least. A lot of us are wandering around in sweats, and the sweats, they stretch. And so if you don't put your jeans on once a week, you might not realize that you're starting to put on a few pounds here and there from inactivity and indulging in food, which is an easy thing to do when you're not really going out too much. So what I would recommend is that you start trying to identify adaptive behaviors and substitute those in now before the other ones might start kicking in. And if they already have, and they may or may not, but if they already have, then you can still start to track those less adaptive behaviors and start substituting in the ones that are useful. What's useful? Exercise, obviously. Doing some exercise is a great way to kind of use up some time, and oftentimes your self-esteem will take a little bit of a boost after you do the hard thing. And whatever the hard thing is, if it's tackling paperwork or the exercise, obviously, whatever it might be for you, cleaning up the closet, those kinds of things will definitely help your self-esteem and be a useful behavior to use otherwise instead of some sort of maladaptive behavior. Um, so, with that in mind, throwing back to the first video I did, it's a good time to build schedules, build regular routines, and try to put in the better behaviors. Um, and so that's about it for this talk. I hope it was somewhat useful, not too long, and I'll see you again. Stay strong.